Welcome to Wargaming Recon. I am your host, Jonathan J. Reinhardt. Wargaming Recon is the only member of the Troll in the Corner podcast network to discuss historical and New England gaming. This is episode 142. That's right, 142, Age of Sigmar with guest Aaron Bostian. So before we dive in, just a couple things for people. First of all, for you new and longtime listeners alike, there's going to be a lot of stuff we're going to talk about here on the show. You don't have to worry about remembering all of it because it'll be on our show notes. You can get those by going to wargamingrecon.com/WR142. That's wargamingrecon.com/WR142. And then the second thing is, I just want to make a point that this is the first time in about 5 or more years that I've talked about any Games Workshop product, any Games Workshop game, really in any sort of depth. And there's a reason why. And I don't want to give too much away, and I don't want you to think, oh, that means it's great or it means it's really bad. It just means that I feel Age of Sigmar is worth talking about. And I am delighted to have a very special guest here. He's been on the show many, many times. And the last time was, as you can see, I'm just checking my notes, episode 140. And we had a blast talking about all sorts of stuff then. But I'm delighted to welcome Aaron Bostian, who is also a founding member of the Warhammer Culpepper Group and co-organizer of the Age of Sigmar tournament for the Nova Open 2015. So, Aaron, welcome aboard.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
So
and the Nova Open thing was just kind of official today, but I'm glad you gave that a plug too. So,
well, I think you're going to have a lot of fun doing it because you enjoy teaching people games. You enjoy helping people to experience new games. And Age of Sigmar is just about as new as they come, right? It was released early in June 2015 is when the rules came out, and I don't remember the exact date, but they released the rules for free online. You could get the core rules, which are 4 pages long, and we'll talk more about that later. But that, and then instead of army codices or army books, they released what they're calling war scrolls, one war scroll per army, so to speak. And those are free online as well. You can get free PDF downloads through the Games Workshop website. Links in the show notes. But I know we're going to talk more about that. But that's when it all kind of came out. And leading up to this, there was a lot of buzz. And I'm not someone who has my finger on GW, really. Once upon a time, I was a fanboy. And then I got disgusted with them. And I mean, maybe that's a topic for another show. My feelings on Games Workshop, how they treat their customers, their employees. But the reason why I mention this is that, like, even though my head was under a rock insofar as GW is concerned, even I knew that there was craziness going around and that people were upset, but they were confused and they didn't know what it was, but there was something going to happen. And basically, for those who don't know, Age of Sigmar is a new continuation, or some would say a replacement, for Games Workshop's long-running game, Warhammer Fantasy. So they ended the previous edition, and I think they called it like the End Times, and then they came about with this, which is kind of like a rebirth or a renaissance, I think is how Games Workshop would probably convey it. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, because Aaron, you've been much more in tune with Games Workshop products, mainly because you've played this stuff for a lot longer than I have, or at least recently anyway.
Yes, definitely more recently, just more with the last edition. I only started playing about a year and a half ago, mostly because that's what my local game store was selling at the time, and we kind of touched on that in that episode. We talked about game stores closing.
Yep.
But yes, it is kind of like it's a new game. It's loosely set in the old setting, only because the end times came about and the entire planet was destroyed and various cosmic energies were flung out into various realms and dimensions, and then a long time passes, and then there's what's called the Age of Chaos, where the chaos manifests itself throughout the mortal realms, is what they're called. But it kind of reminds me of the planes when I was playing D&D back in the day. And Age of Chaos kind of starts taking over, but of course, because it's chaos, it's not very good at organization and structure. And so it kind of starts turning in on itself just when it's about to seize complete control and victory and domain over everything and all realities. which allows a little chink in the armor. And then there's this deity, Sigmar, who starts organizing his own forces of order and prepares his forces and then launches this huge coordinated campaign to vanquish chaos from all of the mortal realms. And that is the beginning of the Age of Sigmar.
I don't think it's an understatement for me to say that perhaps the negative reaction to the announcement of Age of Sigmar and to the initial experiences of people having with downloading the rules and looking at them, that kind of stuff, was perhaps one of the largest negative reactions for tabletop wargaming in quite a long time.
Yes, indeed. And I think as we can both relate to from the geek fandom aspect, anytime you take a beloved series or setting or characters and say, oh, something terrible happened, the season is ending early, we're going to have this big final episode at the end of which everybody dies. People always get upset by that. Like, imagine if instead of doing we don't know really what's coming with the Star Wars movie, but just say, the new Star Wars movie comes out and everybody's excited about it, and it turns out that reality implodes and all of the Star Wars characters, Han Solo, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, Luke Skywalker, and I have no inside information on this, but we'll just say in the new movie they all die at the end of the movie in tragic ways, and then the whole Star Wars reality ends. And as the trailer rolls, it's very clear that no more Star Wars movies are going to be made ever again. A lot of people would probably be really upset by that.
Well, yeah, and I can understand some of the concern, and in part mainly because I feel like in a way I've been through this. Granted, back then all the stuff still existed. I was the one who walked away. I said, you know what? I'm going to leave all this Games Workshop world. I'm going to leave the GW metric behind, and I want to move to something else. I want to try historicals. And how do you do it? And when you do that transition, and the reason why I'm talking about this is because I feel there's a very strong analogy between having to adapt to Age of Sigmar from the previous systems as what I had to do, or what anyone has to do when they go from something so structured as the GW metric, or I would even argue nowadays what Battlefront is doing with Flames of War to some degree, but that really structured metric there in experience, and then you flung out into something new. There's no roadmap. There's no safety net. You don't know what to do. You don't know where to go, and it's scary when you don't have any experience on whatever it is. That's where fear comes in, right? Because we're afraid of the unknown, and whatever that unknown may be, whether it's going to a new place, or watching a new TV show, or playing a new rule system, or having something that you knew and you loved changed so drastically. However, I really feel that Games Workshop should have taken a page from Douglas Adams and just wrote in big, gigantic, 5 million font letters on front page of the book, "Don't panic."
Yes, that would have probably been good, because I think there was a lot of collective concern, not just among players in my group, but kind of online and in some of the podcasts I listen to, just saying nobody knows what's going to happen. It could just end. It could be something completely different. It could be a hybrid of those two extremes. And getting some kind of affirmation from the company saying, we're not going out of business. We're not, we're not going to just chop off everybody's heads that works here and do something. Something else is coming and it's going to be cool. You're right. If it had just been a big poster that just said "Don't panic" in big friendly letters, that probably would have eased the transition a little bit, or at least, because I think there was some collective, worry, which led to when the new system was revealed, kind of everybody expected another shoe to drop somehow, so that's that's true. Maybe it's the way those I almost use a I almost used a non-friendly. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to use a slur against our English friends across the Atlantic. But I don't know. Maybe they have a different marketing system or a concept of marketing than Americans do. But yeah, I think an American company probably would have had all kinds of lead up and preparation and lots of trailers and lots of, probably to the point that it'd be kind of like nauseating.
Well,
but Age of Sigmar is here, and it's not as terrible as everybody had no, that's true.
I love that.
There was
it's not as terrible as you thought.
there was a lot of concern that it was going to ruin wargaming for everyone for all the rest of time, and I really don't think it did that. And especially coming from a historical wargamer perspective, it's kind of exciting that a big wargaming company and miniature company, which we can agree that Games Workshop is kind of the leader as far as production and retail sales across the planet goes. They certainly haven't started a Kickstarter project as far as I'm aware yet, which they probably don't need to because they've got a lot of revenue stream and so on and so forth. But it's not more of the same with Age of Sigmar, and it's kind of refreshing. They seem like, in my opinion, they've kind of caught up with some of the trends. One of the main things being free rules for free downloads and a lot of free support material that basically anybody who's interested can check out the website and download everything they need to play. Less the miniatures, of course, but as far as rules go, as far as statistics for the models go, the other week I actually played a game of Age of Sigmar with exclusively confrontation miniatures. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, Jonathan, but Confrontation is a game that came out a few years ago from a French company, and then went by the wayside, and I snapped up a bunch of miniatures for good price, and they're pre-painted minis. They look great. They're fantasy. They're on round bases. So all I did was just plug in some War Scroll statistics for the different models and come to agreement with my opponent on what models represent what units for Age of Sigmar, and we played a game. It was a lot of fun.
Why don't we could talk about the rules, and maybe that's what listeners are expecting. All I want to say insofar as like an overview of the rules, and if you're watching live, because we do record this live, you'll see I'm holding up on the video feed. These are the 4 pages I printed out. You can see highlights of things, highlighted little notations. Not all favorable, some are actually. But why don't we talk about what we like about what Games Workshop has done? And you kind of a little bit already mentioned a few things about the free downloadable rules and how accessible that kind of information is. But why don't we share some of the other stuff that we kind of liked about it? What else what else about Age of Sigmar do you really enjoy?
Well, the rules are definitely just kind of the bare bones, and it's nothing surprising as far as, it's the usual using 6-sided dice, and units have certain movement measured in inches, and they have ranges, and it's about rolling, above a certain amount to score a hit, and below a certain amount is a miss, and there's even multiple wounds per model for some units, but many units just have 1 wound per model. So when they take a hit and then they fail a saving throw, they're removed from the table. The same sort of thing that's been around for decades now. The other component that's interesting, and this kind of seems to borrow from the collectible card gaming industry, is that there's a lot of additional rules on the War Scrolls, and basically you have a unit, for example, that when there's, say, 10 or more models in the unit on the table, there's some kind of in-game benefit, like it gets a +1 die roll modifier to all range to hit rolls, for example, or maybe it gets a bonus to its bravery statistic when you're making a check to keep the unit from running away during combat. So there's kind of those two parts. Is you don't need a big book, and I certainly was frustrated when I tried to play 8th edition Warhammer, and I realized that, you know, in one part of the big book you have rules for the model, but in order, you know, and it says, well, the model has a short bow. In order to find out like what kind of game statistics the short bow has, you have to go look up the weapons chapter and figure out how much of a range the short bow has, what kind of damage it does, those sort of things. So it's kind of cool to have those things all together in one place. And the War Scroll has that. You can basically play a game with, you know, the 4 pages of rules and even one War Scroll per side. You could have a small but complete game. And in that way, again, there's no need to buy a big heavy rule book that you need to carry around to games, and there's certainly no need to have the because I know there's a lot of complaint about the smaller rule books that Games Workshop had in previous editions, where you had to buy a starter box in order to get the smaller book, and everybody wanted the smaller book because you don't necessarily want to carry around the giant tome to your games. You just want the smaller book because you still need to reference the rules. So now you have 4 pages of rules that you can even download for free and put in a little folder, and then you have your War Scrolls you can download for free and put in the same folder, and have everything you need to play the game in like a little peachy folder. So I think that's awesome.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you could even put them on onto a tablet or a mobile device, and that way you don't have as much physical stuff. I'm someone who prefers the physical of it. Like I will download PDF rules from Wargame Vault, but then I'll print them out and I'll have that printout with me, and because I like to be able to have it so I can make notations and changes and that sort of stuff. And for me, it's easier. But you're right. You can buy not buy, but you can get the rules for free online. And I believe in the core box, you can it comes with a rule book, or you can buy the rule book separately, which has all the extra stuff, which is cool. Because I know one of the complaints that people had was that it doesn't have the fluff and the history that existed in previous editions. And actually, I felt the free rules did a really good job about that. That they did add that. And I'm just going to read a paragraph from the first page of the free rules, where they talk about the battlefield, where how you will create the terrain that you're going to put on there and how you're going to lay it out. And it says, quote, "Battles in Warhammer Age of Sigmar are fought across an infinite variety of exciting landscapes in the mortal realms, from desolate volcanic plains and treacherous sky temples to lush jungles and cyclopean ruins. The dominion of chaos is all-pervading, and no land is left untouched by the blight of war."
I think that's exciting, that part where it says infinite number of terrain. It really does kind of and I think that's the big emphasis behind all of this, is that the framework is pretty simple, and this game is really about putting the background, the setting, the game back into the player's hands. And it's I know some players kind of like a complete game that they can open and play, but especially with some war gamers, a lot of them like to tinker with the rules and tinker with the tables and come up with their own scenarios, and that's what this game is all about.
Well, and for me, I think the second most important thing that I loved about this is that there are no points values whatsoever. And I know that's what most people hate about it. They're afraid, how can I create a pickup game that's going to be fair and balanced if I don't have points? This is actually a topic I'm going to use for another show where I'll go in depth on it. I know some people have written about it, but by and large, your points values are not balanced. Points values are not equal, and you could spend points on a gigantic dragon or something, or points on a bunch of skeletons. If they're the same points, in theory, they're equal, right? But they're not. They are not equal. They don't do the same stuff in the battles. And also, and I can't prove this, but for a long time, I've wondered if part of the actual real money cost that players have to spend on models is partially based on how valuable or perceived value of the model in the game. How many points does it have in the game? How good is it going to be? So therefore, we can charge more for it. And again, that's just a hypothesis on my part. But what is not a hypothesis and what I believe can be proven is that in general, point systems, they do create a very easy way to have a pickup game, but they are not necessarily balanced. And I don't mean that they need to be equal, because let's face it, warfare is not equal. You want to set your opponent as much of a disadvantage as possible so that you can win. And that's what war is like in real life, whether it's here on Earth or in an imagined realm. But you want it to be balanced. You want it to be fun, right? And I think that Games Workshop made a gigantic, huge leap forward for themselves and for those who play the games by forcing gamers to actually have to think about it and to say, okay, this is what I have. This is what's going to be fun for me to play. Will this also be fun for you to play against? Does it mean you're going to have the same number of models? No. Does it mean they're going to be the same points values, whatever that is? No. But I really do think that if you give it a try, you'll have much more fun than trying to figure out, well, it's plus an extra point because I upgraded my units to have an halberd, another point because, oh, wait, these guys are on barded steeds, and oh, I'm sorry, I'm 2 points over, so I got to get rid of stuff because we agreed on 1,500 points or 70, so I can't do that. And I mean, that's nonsense, right? And is this a controversial statement for me? Yeah. And maybe I'm making some people unhappy and some people won't listen. I'm sorry, but one, it's how I feel. And two, I really do believe it can be proven. And this is, I don't want to get too high on a soapbox, but I really think Games Workshop did a wonderful thing here by tossing points out. Is it scary? Yeah, but we talked about that already, right? We talked about how it was hard, right, for you, Aaron, to make that leap and to do historicals without having the points behind you and all the detail. But I think that it's very important that Games Workshop took the initiative that they did, like you said, to have these rules available for free and then to keep on pushing forward, to put the power back into the gamer's hands, not into the hands of some game designer or rule creator somewhere else who doesn't know what's going to happen in every single situation in which you game, because they can't do that. It's impossible, right? And so I think one of the best things that they've ever done at Games Workshop, better than just about any game that they've ever created or anything really. The single number one best thing that I think they've done is something that they've done here with Age of Sigmar. And I'm actually, I hate to be one of those people who read stuff, but I'm going to read it. And it's literally titled "The Most Important Rule," all caps. Okay, last thing that they have in the rule, 4-page rules, but also the most important thing. It says, quote, "In a game as detailed and wide-ranging as Warhammer Age of Sigmar, there may be times when you are not sure exactly how to resolve a situation that has come up during play. When this happens, have a quick chat with your opponent and apply the solution that makes the most sense to you both or seems the most fun. If no single solution presents itself, both of you should roll a dice, and whoever rolls higher gets to choose what happens. Then you can get on with the fighting." What a novel idea. Talk with your opponent, have fun with fellow gamers. How dare they, right? This is genius, and I can't believe it took them this long to get here.
Well, maybe they're actually paying attention to what's been going on with like historical war games for the past decade or so. And to that fact, I don't know if the call just dropped out, but it looks like you just got caught in mid-sentence, Jonathan. Uh-oh. All right, well, I hope it's not me. Everything was going fine.
Sorry about that. A little technical difficulty on my end. Um, and of course,
That's okay. That's what editing's for, right?
right when I was getting to like the big point that I want to make, you had mentioned before my crazy technical difficulty that maybe Games Workshop's finally paying attention to what's going on with historicals. And I think you're right. Partly because take a look at Black Powder, right? Black Powder is a game system with many expansions and sequels and set in other time periods. It's created by people who used to work for Games Workshop in its heyday. And one of the most important things that they've done, and one of the core rules, is that basically, if you don't like something in the book, if it doesn't work for your gaming group, if it's not fun to you, you change it, you amend it, you modify it. Power is in your hands, not in some mythical company somewhere. You get to decide what is fun for you. In just the fact that Games Workshop has finally done it is the thing that made me want to talk about Age of Sigmar here on the show, because they get a lot of crap, right? And I think justly so, but they did something really good here. And I mean, I have tons of other things that I love about Age of Sigmar. And I don't want to just talk for like 20 minutes about what I love, because I know you have other things too, but I think these two things, the no points and the literally quote, the most important rule, are the two best things about Age of Sigmar.
Yeah, agreed. And the one irony that I found when this first came out, it came out July 4th. And I actually had some friends online that were like checking out the New Zealand website because of Games Workshop, because it was posting stuff there before, the earlier time zone. But there was a lot of discussion online, and what surprised me was that, or reminded me of a little bit of the kind of the debate in the historical wargaming community about point systems, and how I know when Saga was a big thing, and some other games that were using some point systems to set up scenarios, there was a little bit of debate on some podcasts. So I don't know how big that debate is. I just went to Historicon last month, and I'm pleased to say that that historical wargaming seems to be alive and well, with people setting up their own scenarios and inviting players to join and creating their own terrain. In some cases, creating their own models, but certainly using models from a range of manufacturers. And like I said earlier, the comment about playing with confrontation miniatures, I don't see a reason why Age of Sigmar has to be played with exclusively Games Workshop figures. They do have some awesome models, and I'm enjoying painting some of the new ones. But at the same point, we don't need to be hung up on playing with only the official rules and the official models all the time, because maybe it's just me, or maybe I think it's a common factor in many tabletop wargamers. We're not playing a video game that's got a scripted storyline, occasionally punctuated with either or. You can make this choice for good and be more good, or you can make this choice for bad and have your character be a little bit more bad. Otherwise, you just go around and shoot people, and don't go look behind that. Don't go look behind that building over there, because there's nothing over there. Don't even go over there. You're just gonna bump against an imaginary wall when you try it. The great thing about tabletop games is you can really use your imagination and use fish tank terrain to represent jungles on a mysterious fantasy continent that doesn't even exist. And you can have space marines fighting lizardmen armed with spears and bows. Anything's possible. It's about having fun, using your imagination, using your creativity. And I see people demonstrating that with blog posts and pictures posted on the web all the time, and I'm certainly enjoying that with my local group. So I think that's my big takeaway with Age of Sigmar is the big game company is actually kind of admitting that same thing, that that many of us have realized and are pleased to see the trend turning more towards open gaming like that instead of becoming more restrictive and more like Magic the Gathering.
Well, now that we've talked about some of the things that we enjoy, why don't we talk about some of the stuff that we dislike about Age of Sigmar? Because
Sure.
I don't know about you, but I have a long list.
Okay, well, is there anything else we can say that's good? I guess that's like the main big thing. I do have the big book, so there's still the big book available. It's not quite as big as the old book, but it's got a big book. It's got really awesome artwork and illustrations in it. Great graphics. It's got some kind of cool story to it. It's got a lot of scenarios, a little bit of everything. Of course, in the middle of it, it's got the 4 pages of rules. But it's cool to open up on the desk and read. But so there's that. There's still that.
Yes.
And it was only like $74. So if you still want to buy a big book for like,
wait, did you say only?
For like $3/4 of $100 for US? Yep.
Games Workshop strikes again. No. So what are some things you dislike about Age of Sigmar? There must be something.
I haven't really put a list together of things I dislike.
Do you want me to start then?
Sure, why don't you start?
Okay.
Because it's probably going to mirror some of my own. I just haven't put a lot of thought into it.
I want to say first and foremost that there are things I dislike, but I really do feel it's not just a simple knee-jerk reaction that I think some other people have had when they've had negative reactions. One of the Facebook groups that I love, not because I agree with the content posted there, but just because I think it's so absurd and it makes me laugh, is Age of Sigmar, where they share people's negative reactions. And so leading up to this, the recording of this episode on our Facebook page, I had also shared some of them. And I tell you, just coming across level, I would just burst out laughing because, and I don't mean to denigrate anyone who feels that Age of Sigmar is just like a total disaster. It's your right to feel that way, just as it's my right to find these comments funny because, I mean, come on, if you can't laugh at yourself, what can you do, right? So I just want to share one of them before I get into some of the things I dislike. And I got to say, like, don't go into this rabbit hole unless you're prepared to spend hours and hours of negative reactions because, oh my goodness, there's tons of them out there. So like I said, I only want to read one, and just because it's the one that made me laugh the most is really what it is. So I don't know who said this, but it's on the Age of Sigmar Facebook group. There will be a link in our show notes. So quote, yesterday I tried AOS, Age of Sigmar. I think it's definitely the stupidest thing GW has ever published. Were they drunk or on drugs while writing it? What do you guys think about AOS? Question mark. And maybe this belongs in the mailbag section of the show, but one of the listeners, Michael, had just left a comment basically saying that he found it ironic that the person shared that thought, whoever it was originally, but couldn't take the time to proofread their own statement because there's errors throughout it. And I'm not usually a grammar Nazi or anything like that, but like if you're gonna bash on people because you think their game and their rules are not well done and not well crafted and basically implying that it's shoddy work, maybe, just maybe, it's worth making sure that no one's gonna say, hey, you didn't even proofread your own thing. But that aside, like really, oh, they must have been drunk or on drugs in order to make a game like this. It's just something that makes me laugh. But anyway, that aside, I have what I feel are legit concerns about Age of Sigmar. So one of the things I like about it actually leads into this negative opinion. And I think they try to really streamline the rules as much as possible and to make it more accessible. However, in doing that, I feel that they actually needlessly overly complicated some portions of it. So for example, they use the traditional I go, you go method. A lot of games use that, right? But they alter it so that it's I go, you go, except in some parts, it's I move a unit, you move a unit, then I move a unit. But then in other parts, it's literally straight my side goes and then your side goes, and then my side. And then in other parts, it's, well, if I do this, then I go. If this happens, then you pick one method, okay? There's 40 million different ways to decide. Basically, initiative is what you're talking about for any of these different actions. Choose one. Don't be manic. Don't have a whole hat full that you're trying to cram into there. You're trying to simplify the rules, right? 1, 2, 3, maybe. Not as many as they picked, okay? Because I really think it'll end up with people saying, did you go? Did I? I don't know. Whose turn is it? What do we do now? And that's what they're trying to avoid. And it's hard. It's not easy to condense into, as my old journalism professor used to say, you need to write tight. And it takes a lot of skill to do that. And Aaron, I know you do a fair bit of writing. I'm sure you can appreciate the importance of being precise in your word choices. And they were not. It's throughout whole portions of it.
Yes.
On things like the combat. Combat is going to take up, it's what the game is, right? You're fighting. And when you're dealing with melee and you talk about hand to hand and they have this nonsense, well, my unit go, but then your unit, whose unit? I don't know. And now what do we do? I mean, come on. So one that
well, to be fair, actually, Jonathan, to be fair, the combat activations work entirely different than the turn activations. And I agree. I agree that can be confusing. Once you play it, it makes a lot of sense. And that was one disappointment I had, that they didn't do more of an alternating unit activation system. That it still is the I go you go system, which I'm certainly not a big fan of. And I've been playing a lot of bolt action and Saga lately, and I like how bolt action does it, because it allows kind of an alternating unit system, but at random, which can be cool. Saga, I really love, because it's very clear whose turn it is, but at the same point, you can keep dice in reserve on certain abilities and have reactions. But anyway, I could end up talking about Saga all day. So I'll stop myself. The combat activation system is actually kind of interesting, because you can have multiple units that are engaged in melee, but the players decide to go in alternating sequence. The player whose turn it is gets to pick the first unit that they resolve combat for, and they resolve the attacks for that one unit. And then the other player can decide whether they're going to resolve the combat attacks for the unit that was just attacked, or for a different unit, which kind of puts in an interesting tactical dynamic, because you have to decide, if you have multiple units in melee that at the start of the combat phase, you have to decide, well, if I attack here, that will give me an edge over this unit that it's fighting, but then my opponent could decide to attack over at this other action. I'm losing, because I should be using the proper definitions, but it kind of creates an interesting dynamic, because if your opponent attacks one of your units, you take your casualties immediately, and then you say, well, if I attack back that same unit, I've already taken the casualties. I might as well use my next activation to attack somewhere else, where I can inflict casualties on my opponent, and then save resolving this melee action for the end of the combat phase, because damage has already been done. So actually, after playing that, I kind of like how that works. It is completely different from how the turn sequence works, and yes, that does make it confusing. And I have to admit that the first couple of times that I played the game, I totally got the combat phase wrong. So, yeah, I definitely can echo you, and the unclarity of the rules. It may have actually been better if Games Workshop had borrowed a page from Fantasy Flight, and instead of releasing a free PDF, they just made some of those cool CGI videos that Fantasy Flight does, where the little X-Wings move around without any hands holding them, and the little the movie narrator's voice says, to begin phase 1 of a game of X-Wing, do this. That could have been awesome, because then you could actually see things in action, see examples. And that's one thing that 4 pages of rules doesn't leave a lot of room for illustrations and examples, and that's really what was missing from the Age of Sigmar rules.
See, that doesn't bother me so much, just because, and maybe I'm wrong, but I really do feel that Games Workshop is trying to simplify and streamline the whole system, not just with these 4 pages of rules, but with everything that they're doing. And they don't do that with the combat. If they want that combat system, that's great. But then don't make everything else so different from it. Don't make how you choose who goes first for the first turn so different. Don't make how you lay down terrain so different. Don't make everything else so there's too many different variables. They really need to just pick a few. Do I care which ones? Not necessarily, but just pick a couple. I also think that I'm trying to think of a non-controversial word to use, but they're just some things that are dumb in here. I wrote lame and dumb next to a few things. And I couldn't think. I'm reading the rules and I'm going through it and trying to prep for recording this with you, and I'm thinking, okay, so I've been doing this for years, right? And people are going to expect a certain level of experience behind this and certain take, an unbiased take perhaps, and not like angry Jonathan goes, I hate everything and to heck with all of you, and table flip. And so I'm trying to, and I'm reading, I'm thinking, I like this, and I'm writing, oh, like good, and woo, I think I wrote like woo next to something, and then I got to a couple of things. I wrote dumb exclamation point, lame all caps. So like one of them, for example.
Well, I'm just going to interject and say the optimist in me says those are just opportunities for some awesome house rules.
Well, no, you're right, and I think that's where the most important rule comes into effect, and that. When in doubt, you can house rule. The one problem I've always had with house rules, and I'm someone who loves them, is that my house rules might not be the same as yours. So let's say I move to another place. Let's say I go to a new game store. I'm going to a convention. I don't know what their house rules are like. And maybe, just maybe, and I know this is controversial, but maybe someone's house ruling something incorrectly.
Yeah,
it's dead wrong.
And now that I'm involved with trying to put together an event for a convention, it's definitely painful to try to come up with house rules that streamline the system. Because one thing we didn't point out is that the deployment rule is basically bring whatever you want to the table and just keep putting models down until you're satisfied that you have enough models down, which is almost like a joke rule in effect, that of course any guy who's like a big power gamer that wants to win at all costs is just going to bring his entire collection without regard to any sort of story or a scenario, and just put it all on the table and then completely overwhelm his opponent and win by turn 2. Of course, that won't be fun for anybody involved.
Well, see, I actually thought the rules for this are bad, and it's one that GW uses in 40K with Apocalypse. But I read it and I thought, wait a sec, they're penalizing someone just because they have more models. So let's say I'm going to have a Tomb Lords of Khemri type army. I love skeletons. I want tons and tons and tons of skeletons, just tons of them. Or I love Skaven. I want to have a lot of just regular rats, your entry-level soldier. I just want tons of them on the table. I want 150 of these guys on the table just because I think they're cool. And I have a story behind my clan and all this and that. But someone else says, well, I'm going to put a dragon down. They put the dragon down. They're done. Oh, I'm not saying they're going to win, but it's not the point. They put, I'm done. And you're like, I put all this thought into it. I have this background, this story, this fluff. And oh, wait, I don't get first turn because I have too many models. Like that annoyed me. But one thing I thought was dumb. It's so stupid is really what it is how measurements are done. It says that measurements are taken, quote, between the closest points of the models, unquote, excluding bases. So bases aren't part of the model, so they don't count at all. So you could have a person who's pointing like this, and at the very end is his sword. You measure from the very, 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 very tip of the pointy sword, which means he's that much closer to you than if he's like, I'm gonna hold like this, or I'm gonna shoulder my what. That is so stupid. Why not pick a centralized point on the models or a centralized point on the base so that things are equidistant? None of this, well, because this model is slightly bigger, you're penalized just because, and I can understand maybe some of the thinking was, well, let's say someone does take a dragon, something's that much larger than your regular rank and file, then, there should be some influence there. But by the same token, it's just so ambivalent based on how the sculptor decided to sculpt your particular model. So you could either be penalized or helped through no real reason, and I think it can screw people over a lot. And I think it's just so arbitrary. And dumb is the only word I can come up with for it.
It seems silly, although I don't think it really makes that much difference when you're talking about when you're getting things really close. At least in the games I play, and you're like, I don't know, that's right on the edge of the range. But our general rule in my group is if it looks like it's close, you just go ahead and give it to them. Just say that's within range. And for me, maybe playing a lot of naval games, that's always been a pretty regular measuring style, is measuring from the closest points of the models, because a lot of ships, at least a lot of the ship games I've played, don't have bases.
So. Well, no, but we've usually used a centralized point, a central mast, a central smokestack, a central turret, or something like that, to try to get as near to the middle of a model, so that way you have an equidistant point. And to me,
and then of course the whole thing is like, what happens when you have a brig and it has two masts? Like, well, which you pick, then you have to think about which is the main mast or which is the
you pick whatever's closest to the middle. You measure to the center point, and you just happen to use a turret or whatever as a reminder of that. But what I really think is dumb about this, one moment I could be facing towards you and my sword's right here, so I'm 2 inches away, and then the person moves me, the model, and I happen to be moves 45. I'm still going the same direction, but I just happen to be twisted 45 degrees. So now I'm 5 inches away because of, and it's so stupid. There's no other way to phrase it. Then I also think,
and I think that was really, I actually thought it was a clever way around their whole square and round base thing, because it no longer mattered what kind of base your figure was on. And I think this is one of those things that kind of everybody is house ruling on, that you can measure from the closest point on the model or from the edge of the base. That seems to be kind of the big consensus that I'm seeing. So yeah, it does seem silly, but I think it's one of those things. It almost might be a tongue-in-cheek sort of thing, because I really think sometimes that there were some editors kind of giggling behind their hands when they approved the rules and just said, we can't wait to see the firestorm that erupts when people read this, because we know it's going to just upset so many people and get so many people talking. And maybe that's part of their marketing plan, is to get people really worked up and excited and call this attention to it.
It could be, because this is certainly very dumb, but not the only dumb thing I felt that they did with Age of Sigmar. I thought that let's talk about something else that I think is really lame. When you're picking targets, I feel it's both overly complicated and absurd. So you target the unit, and then you need to see if your melee weapon's in range, right? Because each melee weapon has a different range. So although you are actually in close combat range, you're within that 3 inches that they define as close combat, your weapon might only have a 1 inch range. So you're not actually in range, even though you're actually in close combat range. So therefore, you don't get to participate. And to make sure you have line of sight, when in doubt, get down on your knees and see if the model has. Everyone's been doing that for a million years, right? But is that just talk it over with your fellow gamers and say, okay, what do you think? Does this model have line of sight? Let's be fair about it. What do we think? Talk, engage, right? Not get down on your hands and knees and squint and kind of. It's stupid. It's lame. Well, either you're in close combat or you're not, right?
Yeah. Well, the close combat thing, you do have the pile in phase that happens right before you do the attack. So
you do, but your weapon still, even though you're in close combat
sure.
range, your weapon might just happen to only be a 1-inch range,
right?
But you're in close combat range. So therefore, if you're in close combat range, you should be able to engage in close combat.
Well, but the thing is, Jonathan,
you shouldn't.
You're talking about a model on model basis as opposed to unit on unit basis. So some of the models will be in close combat range, some of them won't. There's some games that do that where, okay, so half your guys are in close combat range and they're going to fight, and those other guys at the end of the line, they're going to have to wait till next turn to move in closer.
But that's fine, but that's not what they're doing here. What they're doing here is they're saying these models are in close combat range, but they can't fight because even though they're within the 3-inch close combat range, their weapon is not. And that actually points to a larger problem, I think, that they have with Age of Sigmar. They're trying to be both a skirmish game and a non-skirmish game at the same time, and they're failing to do both. I think they're leaning towards a skirmish, which is great. Do that, but also support the larger size. So if you want to enable people to do both, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, you need to actually have enough that you can't be everything to everyone. But I think in trying to do that, they didn't put enough effort into what would really happen with both. And I think that they're trying to use just talk about it with your opponent, your fellow gamer, as a catch-all, because they couldn't or wouldn't do more. And I think this is a huge problem with the rule set. And one of my largest issues that I have with it is just that they're trying to be too much. There's nothing wrong with just being a skirmish game. There's nothing wrong with just being a large scale or doing both, but you really have to just provide the support to both. And I think what you would probably say, and I would agree with you on this, is that they were trying to figure out how to deal with the differences of bases, whether you're having square bases, whether you're having rectangles, whether you're having circles, how to deal with that, because I don't think they wanted to say to anyone, and I certainly wouldn't want to tell anyone, you need to rebase everything, because that's like the worst thing that you can say to a gamer, right? But in trying to do all of this, they screwed it over right here. This is just awful. It's poor planning, poor game design, and like, really, what were they thinking with this? Because so much of this is really good. It's interesting, it's exciting, and I think they've done a really good job overall in trying to streamline stuff. But then you come up with something like this, which is dumb, or you come up with, and this is just nonsensical as far as I'm concerned, the method of allocating wounds. This is another spot where I wrote dumb in caps on the paper. Wounds can be placed on models out of range of the attack who can't be seen as long as they belong to the unit. Don't mind me, I'm just behind this hill, but I'm within range, I'm in the unit, so I'll still take your casualties for you. Maybe what they were thinking, because this is how it used to be in previous editions of Warhammer Fantasy, was the idea was you were in such close ranks that basically the guys in front really are the ones who took the casualties, but instead of pulling the models out of the front, they just figured the guys in back would kind of like rush in to fill the spot, which is fine. But again, that doesn't work if you're doing it as a skirmish game, which they kind of do in both here, and it goes back to that failure. So it doesn't make any sense why someone who's out of range and can't even be seen is the person who's taken the model who's taken the wounds for you. What? I mean, come on.
It does, yeah, it does have a little bit of the dual multiple personality thing, because on the one side the line of sight is true line of sight, and on the other hand, then we're going to ignore where the positions of the models are for the sake of, the one guy hits another model with an axe, but then the drummer boy at the end of the line somehow takes the hit. Yeah, it does. It is a weird dynamic there, but
it's humorous too. I mean, like you just said, I think a lot of people at the table would get a laugh. Oh, look, you killed this guy, but this guy over here, I never liked him anyway. Bam, he's done off the table.
That's true.
Maybe that'd be funny. I don't know. Like, I would laugh. But for a game, I mean, come on. Like,
well, I think
games work
again, this game is a lot of fun to teach to new players that have no tabletop experience, and really that's kind of my hope for where this is going, because I think this could be a big gateway game for for gamers to get into tabletop miniature gaming. I don't think Age of Sigmar is going to be the end-all be-all of the future of miniature gaming. And in fact, it's kind of funny because I have another friend of mine who Halo Fleet Battles just came out about the same time. And of course, I haven't gotten my copy yet. It's actually, I ordered it through my friendly local gaming store instead of buying it online. And I just got a notification this morning that my copy is reserved and waiting behind the counter for me to pick up. So I'm very excited about that. But a friend of mine is pretty sure, we kind of have a little rivalry because he's pretty sure that Halo is going to be the game that attracts all kinds of, non-tabletop gamers to the tabletop.
They said that about the previous Halo game too, and that failed. The miniatures game. Do you remember that, the pre-painted stuff? Because I bought
no. Who put that out?
I honestly I don't remember. I've never, up to the point I played that game, I never played Halo before. I played it when I got a 360, and not the game for me. But I know a lot of people love Halo.
Right. Yeah.
And so they thought, oh, Halo collectible miniatures. It's what's going to do it. It's going to get all those the frat boys in, and all these people who the video gamers can come to. And it didn't. It flopped. It was overpriced. It was poorly designed. The models weren't that great, and nobody liked it. And so then it died. And I'm not saying that's going to happen with this, but I'm just saying, we've been down this road before with Halo. It's
sure, but the difference here is that it's a fleet game from Spartan Games. So I have to say, give them some credit for that, because I'm excited because it's got a kind of a saga dice allocation to battle board component to it as well, and it's fleet battles in space. So it's hard to go wrong for that for me.
And I know some people have liked it. They really have, and it's gotten some decent reviews. And I mean, I haven't played it. Does that mean I won't? No, but I mean, I'm gonna wait and see. I actually, this isn't my bottom line. I'm actually gonna ask you what like your bottom line opinion is of Age of Sigmar. But and this is not mine, but I do think Age of Sigmar is gonna be around for a while. I think it's gonna be a game that people aren't giving enough credit to right now, and that in time to come, more and more people will find that they really enjoy it. But what would your bottom line be for someone? If someone says to you, give me your elevator pitch on the game, your 30 seconds, what do you think about Age of Sigmar? Good, bad, or what?
Are you married or have a girlfriend or a child that you'd like to get excited about tabletop miniature gaming? If so, try Age of Sigmar.
So you're in favor then?
I'm in favor of it because my wife is actually excited about playing Age of Sigmar games with me. And Warhammer Fantasy Battles was just not something she wanted to play, mostly because the complexity. She is a big gamer. She and we've talked about this before on the show. But tabletop miniature games just seem too fiddly to her. And she's definitely more of a board gamer, but she really likes this. And it's funny because after about our third game, and after beating me a couple times, she said, "You know what? I think my Wood Elf Way Watchers are a little bit overpowered. I think I shouldn't have as many of them on the table as I have."
I love that.
So that naturally led to saying, "Well, why don't we just try having it where you have a unit of only 5 Way Watchers instead of 10, and maybe I can take a few more Skaven rats in my force." So, but that's kind of the thing for me, is it's a good introductory game. I think it could get a lot of mileage, but I mean, there's not a lot of cool fantasy games out there that don't involve a lot of investment to a certain setting or a certain kind of fantasy style. Age of Sigmar is certainly, like, if you got some elf models, if you got some dwarf models, put them on the table. You got some dragons, you've got some flying lizards or something, put them on the table. We'll find war scrolls that go with them. I'm sure people and fans are going to create their own war scrolls. This seems like a game that could benefit from a lot of fan-driven content. I'm already trying to figure out how to create some war scrolls for my Confrontation Wolfen faction, which could be cool. So Yeah, my takeaway is if you want to try to get your wife to actually sit down and play a game, this might be your last hope. And possibly your only hope, but it's a pretty good hope. So I really never thought I'd get my wife. I got her to play some Uncharted Seas for about 20 minutes a couple years ago. I didn't dare try to introduce her to some of the more complex naval games that I like to play. But for this, like, the models look cool and to her, and the rules are pretty straightforward, and she likes playing it. So that's the big selling point for me.
Yeah, it's been a success for you, and the reasons why she likes it are things that made me think that I was going to love this. I thought, it has all the hallmarks for things that I like. I talked about this a little bit when Adrian Benson was on, and we were talking about Naval Thunder, that the people with whom I game know that there are certain types of games that I will play. If it is too complicated, too many charts and things, I'm probably not going to be that interested. I'll give it a try. You probably won't get me to play it a second time. I like something where I can play, I can have a good time, and then we can play like 3 or 4 or 5 different games in a session instead of one game that lasts all day. So that's why, although a game like Talisman, for example, board game, fantastic board game, very well done, it takes you like 6 hours to play. I don't play it. So I saw this and I thought, I loved Warhammer Fantasy. I love the world about it. I've read a lot of the Black Library stuff, and I've gotten really into it. And, it has all this stuff to it. It has the free rules that you can download, the free war scrolls. I have the stuff, right? I have more Games Workshop stuff than anyone needs to know, really. And so much of it is still new in box, and just tons and tons and tons of it. So I have this stuff, and I could get off my butt if I wanted. I could do this, and it could be a lot of fun, and maybe people will play. And partly too, the fact that so many people are so negative about it, maybe think, well, maybe they're just blowing smoke. Maybe there's really nothing there, and they're just like over exaggerating all the nonsense. And then I heard, oh, look, it has this most important rule: talk with your gaming buddies. What a novel idea! Work it out. Think for yourself. What's not to love about that? Things I really enjoy. And then I read the rules, and there are things I liked, and then, as we talked about a little bit, things that are just so dumb. So my bottom line really is that the overarching philosophy that Games Workshop has used for Age of Sigmar it's out of the park. It's fantastic. It is where they and every game company needs to be. Have fun, talk with your fellow gamers. That's perfect. But then they just it's fallen short when you really get to those details, when it's trying to be too much to too many people. And so for me, Age of Sigmar is like, don't bother. In time, it could be there. For me, it's not there yet, but it might be for you. And I really hope that they fix the glaring errors in here with an FAQ or an errata or something like that, because I think if they do, it could get me excited about this. But for now, it's not there. And maybe it's because it's too big of a change for Games Workshop to do it all, to have it all happen at this one time. They have to get the models out. They got to get all the articles online, all the erratas, the apps, all this other stuff. Plus, with all this outrageous and stupid backlash from so many places, that just, I feel a lot of it's unfounded. But there is a kernel of truth here. The rules have some great stuff in it, but then you look at something like allocating wounds. I don't even have to be anywhere near the battle, but I'm still going to take your wound and die. Okay. So that's why, for me, it's a don't bother. But like you said, Aaron, I think it could work for people. I really do. And I think if they fix some of these problems, or if people, gamers like you and I, choose to house rule this stuff and to fix it ourselves, because the power's in our hands now, right? It's not in Games Workshop headquarters over in Nottingham. It's in your home. It's in my home. It's in everybody's local game store and all that kind of stuff. If we choose to kind of fix this stuff ourselves, we can make it better than what it is. And so I think there's hope. Hope is a good thing, but you shouldn't let it prevent you from having joy and fun with things that are already good now. So there are other systems out there. There's one called Frostgrave. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I'm told it's very similar. So it could be something for people to pursue. And of course, Mantic has their whole line. It's a cheaper alternative to Games Workshop. And I know a lot of people are going to jump ship and go there. And I've heard nothing but great things about Mantic stuff. I've never played, but I've heard wonderful things. And but I think people should really try Age of Sigmar, even though it's not working for me. I'm not endorsing nor promoting it, but it could definitely work for people. So with that being said, why don't we move on to the mailbag section of the show? So from Facebook, we've had a lot of really cool stuff happening on Facebook lately. But we got this comment from listener Sigur, who said of episode 137, the Great Wargaming Facebook groups, he had a recommendation, quote, "Old Hammer's pretty good," unquote. So thank you very much for your comment and your suggestion. Old Hammer, I believe, is a Facebook group for people who like to play Warhammer Fantasy how it was back in the beginning, and they preserved the old ways that are no longer supported, previous editions, so that you can kind of do that sort of stuff. And then I also had a post up at one point just talking about this topic, saying that, we're going to be talking about Age of Sigmar and just asking for people's inputs. And so listener Adam said, quote, "I have to admit that it has made me look at GW for the first time in years," unquote. And I know Adam, he is not a Games Workshop kind of guy. He doesn't normally do these sorts of games. He's more into historicals, that kind of stuff. But it caused him to pause and take a look. And I think that's a very good and important step for many people. So it's pretty interesting to see that. And there's a lot of really bad comments out there from people about Age of Sigmar, which I just find them funny. So that's how I am. But I want to let people know a few things. First of all, remind everyone that this show is made possible by audible.com. So Aaron, I know you are an Audible user and you love the service. I want to let people know that you can get Audible free 30-day trial, and you get a free audiobook of your choice, whatever you want to listen to. I'm listening to Go Set a Watchman, the new Harper Lee, or the new old Harper Lee, depending on your take on it. Aaron, are you listening to anything interesting?
We are actually listening to the sequel to Maze Runner right now. Lainey and I both are listening to that. So we're enjoying that, although it's not right before bedtime listening.
No, my wife read the trilogy and then the prequel, and I read the first one, and she said it gets very dark, I think is the way to phrase it.
Yes, it does.
But there's so many different options here on Audible that you can pick from. I'm reading, like I said, the Go Set a Watchman or listening, but I just finished one that was really cool. It's called Without You, There Is No Us. It's an audiobook about North Korea. There's this woman, she's a journalist, and Suki Kim is the author, and she posed as a Christian missionary, and she went and she taught the children of the North Korean elite English at this very selective college. And so she kind of opens up the Iron Curtain, so to speak, and you get to learn a lot about North Korea. And it's sad. It's really, really sad about the disconnect there. And I think it's an area of the world that we would all do well to learn a little bit more about. So that's Audible. Like I said, you get a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial. Go to wargamingrecon.com/audible, and that gets you that. And then also, just want to announce that there's a very special deal you can get for Wargaming Soldiers and Strategy magazine. They have just finished their Great Wargaming Survey for 2015, but you can use a special link we have, wargamingrecon.com/WSS-digital, and that'll get you a 1-year digital subscription to Wargame Soldiers and Strategy magazine for the low price of $16.95 American. I don't know about how much it is for in your area, Aaron, but for here, if I want to get a print copy of it, it's like $9 American per issue. So this is like 3 print issues worth, and you get a whole year's digital subscription, which is pretty cool. And then what else do we have for you? Let's see. Just a reminder that we do live recording. So Aaron and I, we're recording now, but by the time you listen to it, it'll be afterwards. But you can check out the live recordings by going to our live page. There'll be a link in the show notes. And then I want to thank everyone who supports the show on Patreon. Patreon's a really great way that you can get in touch with creators that you love what they do, whether it's Wargaming Recon or other stuff. So I want to thank Dave and the War Games at Battleshades Facebook group for being Patreon patrons. And if you want to back us here on Wargaming Recon, you can do that through Patreon for as little as $1 a month. $1 an episode, rather. Or if you back at the higher level of $3 an episode, you get thanked by name in every episode. Patreon backers get episodes before anyone else. So episodes normally come out, on alternating Mondays, but Patreon backers usually get it that weekend before. And your support helps us to do really cool things. So we've had a few goals that we've met, And we're working on meeting our next goal, which is to obtain a digital scheduler. We're just $10 away from that. And this digital scheduler will allow us to more easily get in touch with guests, to schedule them and book them for the show, so that way we can have more guests to come on here. It's what I use with you, Aaron, and I use with all sorts of people. They have a lot of extra features, and we can upgrade to that professional account level with this. So all it takes is just 4 of you listeners to back the show for just $3 an episode, and then we'll meet that goal. So I know that we can get there, and I want to thank everyone for their support on Patreon. That's wargamingrecon.com/Patreon. And then let's see, the next episode of the show comes out August 31st. That's episode 143, the TSR Podcast Network with Peter Bryant. And that's also going to be the next live episode that we're going to be doing. And that'll be on Saturday, August 22nd at 1 o'clock. We'll have that live. But otherwise, I believe that's all we have for this episode. So, Aaron, any parting words you want to share for Age of Sigmar for people?
Well, only that you can try for free. Yeah, I'm not gonna be a big apologist for it. And I kind of agree with the sense that either people absolutely hate it or absolutely love it. I think Games Workshop did something right in the fact that they've managed to kind of bring together elements that have been trending in the hobby for a while, and they've acknowledged some things and brought it forward in their new game. Definitely looking forward to your next episode, and of course I'm going to be bugging you about coming on and talking about Halo fleet battles at some point too, and Saga. I can't get enough of Saga these days. So I got one of my fantasy players who was not a big fan of the Age of Sigmar thing, and I said, well, let's try playing Saga, and he really liked it. He's a bit more of a board gaming fan, but he really liked the dynamic with the Saga dice and the battle boards. So that's my main hope, really, is that where Age of Sigmar is going is it just introduces more people to the hobby at large, and gets games played on more tables. And of course, I'm not real secret about saying, like, my main goal is to recruit more players to get them to play the games I really want to play. So,
well, I think that's a good thing. And, just because I'm not condoning Age of Sigmar, nor am I saying it's for me, doesn't mean it's not for you. And I agree with you, Aaron. People should decide for themselves. Check out the rules. They're free online. We'll have links in the show notes. You can get the free 4-page rules. You can get the War Scrolls for free. And then also through the Black Library, and you need a free account with the Black Library, but we'll have a link in our show notes. You can get the primer, which is also free. You download it onto your computer. It'll work on your mobile device. And it's more than just, it has the rules, but it's more than just that. It has photos of the models, a beautiful color. It has a little more background on things. It's worth checking that out instead of just the rules. Mainly because it gives you some of the stuff that people say Age of Sigmar is lacking, the fluff and the history. Is this a huge change? Absolutely. Has Games Workshop done a lot of good with it? Yeah. Is it where it needs to be? No. But someday maybe it will be. I got to tell you, I really never thought that I would be saying anything positive about Games Workshop here on the show. Like I said, way back in the day, that's what the show was. In 2006, we did a lot of Games Workshop stuff, just tons and tons and tons of it. And then in time, I said, I'm done with you, Games Workshop. Bleep you and all you stand for. It. Not literally, but I was not a fan, and then moved away. And so just the fact that we were talking about Age of Sigmar here, I think I should tell all of you listeners something. This is a huge and generally good change for Games Workshop. It's not where it needs to be yet, and I think it will be there in time. But until then, it's an option for people. There's many different games for many different types of gamers. And that's a good thing, We're not all the same, and we shouldn't be, because then we would be boring. So, Aaron, thank you so much for coming here on Wargaming Recon.
Well, and I should say to that note, I am actually having a lot of fun with kind of the open format, because we're putting together a couple events at Nova Open, and I'm looking forward to putting together kind of old style campaign gaming. So that should be fun, and I want to kind of keep it open, and I've got a series of scenario cards that I'm working on, but I want to keep it open to the point where when the players show up, we can kind of decide as a group which rules we're going to go with, which house rules we want to come up with. So it could be a lot of fun. I'm kind of aiming for recreating the game store experience at a convention. So this might be one of my few opportunities to really try to run with that, because we're not going to get a huge crowd, but we could get some enthusiastic players, and we could have a lot of fun with it. So I'm looking forward to that. And that is first weekend in September in the DC area.
Yeah, September 3rd to the
Yep.
6th, right? Arlington, Virginia.
Yeah. So I actually have something to plug, and I almost forgot to plug it. Because usually you're always asking me, is there anything you want to plug? No, I don't. I'm just this guy with a blog. It doesn't matter. So,
Well, I think this is
Nova Open should be fun, even if you're not a big fan of Age of Sigmar and you're sad to see 8th edition Fantasy go. Nova Open is a great convention in the DC area. I would say it's. I haven't gone to TotalCon, but so I can't compare that. But for me, my limited conventions I've gone to, Nova Open is the best. This year they've got an X-Wing tournament, they've got 40K, they've got Malifaux. They're doing demo games. They are even having a Magic tournament, so it should be a great weekend. And my wife is going with me, and she's going to play some games. So. She's exciting. So I'm really looking forward to going to a gaming convention with my wife. So
yeah, well, I think people should check it out. I know around here they do Nova qualifiers at TotalCon. I think for 40K is what they do them for. But
yeah, they have a really big 40K event. So
people get very excited about Nova events. And so if you're in the area of Arlington, Virginia, September 3rd to the 6th, be sure to check it out, and then make sure you stop by and say hi to Aaron. So I wish you a lot of luck with that. I think you're going to have a lot of fun having this all set up and organized and running it at the convention. So you guys know the drill. No matter what's going on in your lives, no matter how much you're either hating or loving Age of Sigmar, no matter just how busy you are, you have to keep on gaming.